Hello guys, today we are dealing IP cameras. I'm going to show you how to set up and configure your IP camera. Now to my left here I have an analog camera here, and I have a bullet analog camera, and I have a bullet IP camera here and a mini dome IP camera. Now what's the difference between an analog camera and an IP camera? Now if you look at the head for the signal connector here, it looks like a BNC receiver. All right, analog cameras, we run coaxial cables for analog cameras, and at the end of this, the end of the coaxial cable, you just terminate it with a BNC. That's a British Navy connector. The second end of the analog camera is the power receiver, and most analog cameras use 12 volts DC. Well, I've seen some who use 24 volts AC, but like I said, most of them use 12 volt DC. All right, now for the IP cameras, that is an RJ45, all right, connector head right there. So for IP cameras, we run Cat5 cables or Cat6 cables. All right, you run them to the camera and you terminate the end with an RJ45 pin, which you connect to this end. The second part of it is just like the analog camera, the power receiver. Like I said, it uses 12 volts. Okay, now today we're not dealing IP cameras, so I'll just shift this aside. All right, and this is not working, so I'll just leave this here for demonstration purposes. This is what I'll be using for my tutorial. Now for the connection, when IP cameras are run, like I said, you use Cat5 or Cat6 cables and you run them directly to a switch, unlike the analog cameras where you run coaxial cables and you run them directly from the camera to a DVR, which is a digital video recorder. For the IP cameras, although you use an NVR, which is a network video recorder, you run them directly to a switch. All right, the reason why is this: most NVRs usually come with one network interface card, so you can't have installed 12 cameras and expect to run the 12 cameras directly to the NVR. Rather, you install 12 cameras and you run them directly to a network switch, and you connect the switch to your network, and you connect your NVR also to the network, and you'll be able to access your cameras. All right, so this is going to serve as my network switch right here, and this is going to serve as this 12 volts DC, as you can see, connected to the power outlet, and my network switch also is connected to my network wall there. And I also have a patch cable here which is connected to my computer right here. Okay, so next I'll be switching to my desktop to configure the IP camera. Stay tuned. Hello, welcome to my desktop. Alright, now this is the concluding part of my IP camera configuration. Now, most IP cameras have what you call a config tool, and the config tool is basically helps you to configure your camera at first startup. Like for example, most IP cameras come with the default IP addressing, which you may not know. Alright, and these IP addresses may be different from your present network IP addressing scheme. So the config tool first of all helps you to connect to your IP cameras when you've connected them to the network. All right, so now I'm just going to launch the config tool for Dalhua IP cameras, which is this, and immediately it has seen two devices. Now the first device is a PC NVR. Now it's seeing this PC NVR, which is my system, because I've installed the Dalhua PC NVR software on my system. And the second device here is the IP camera. Now as you can see, it has an IP address of 192.168.0.6 and a gateway of 192.168.0.1. Now let me check my own network, which here, and you see I'm on the 192.168.1 subnet, and the IP camera is on the 192.168.0 subnet. So definitely they are not going to be able to communicate. Let me show you. I'm going to ping that's .6. all right, so there is no connection because they are on different subnets. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the config tool to change the IP address scheme. So this is 192.168.0.6. I'm going to change it to 192.168.1.6 and also the gateway. All right, now the default username and password is admin. So I'm going to just modify that right now, and IP modify is successful. All right, as you can see here, it was successful and the IP address has changed. So let me try and ping the new IP address 6 -T. All right, there's communication. So now I am connected. I've successfully connected the IP camera to my network. So I'm going to go to the config again, and this is me. Hello. Okay, now this is the video, and here I can change settings. I can change my brightness settings. All right, I can play with my contrast. I can do a lot of things here, and the channel is 1 because there's only one channel, and the color mode standard, soft or bright. I'm going to choose soft. All right, now the next tab here is what you call the network settings, where you have the IP version, IPv4, which we are using. Now the DHCP there is there because it's trying to ask you, do you want the network to automatically assign an IP address to the camera when you want to start up? This might be a good idea, but I don't like the idea of my camera having different IP addresses every day when the network starts up. So I prefer having a static IP address, right? Now the subnet mask, which is a class C subnet mask, and the gateway, which with my router address. Now the MAC address of the camera. Now the TCP IP port 37777. Now this port is very important because when you're doing an NAT, in case you want to watch your cameras from outside your network, this is port you're going to forward on your router. Now they also the HTTP port, which is 80 by default. Also, when you want to do an NAT, if you want to watch your cameras from outside on the web, from outside your local network, you also have to port forward this port 80 to your camera IP address. Now the user datagram protocol UDP 3778. All right, like I said, don't forget this port number for the TCP and the HTTP because we're going to use them later on. Now the next tab, which is the encode. Encode taking the time to come up. All right, it's come up. Now the encode tells you about the channel, which is 1 on mainstream, regular, motion, alarm. The encode mode, how do you want your videos to be encoded? We have the H.264 MJPG. Now the resolution, we're using the 720p, which 1.3 is the highest, 1.3 mega. Right, and the frame rate, which is 25. Now the bitrate control is CBR, and we have the VBR. We're using the CBR and the bitrate kbps. The next tab is the upgrade. Now the upgrade is for you to update your firmware of the device, as the name suggests. So when you have the firmware, if you downloaded the firmware, you just load the firmware in and you click upgrade. Last but not the least, the system info tells you about the serial number of the device, the version, the firmware version, the build date, which was 2012, 23rd of May, and the type IPC HDW 2100. So that's that about configuring the camera from the config tool. All right, now now that our camera is on our network, as far as the network is concerned, you can access your cameras using two methods. You may have an NVR, which is also connected to your network, where you search for the IP cameras and you'll be able to watch them on your monitor. But I don't have an NVR right here, so I just have my laptop. Now the two ways you can access the IP camera from your laptop, from your computer, is by either accessing the web portal of the camera or the application. Now to access the web portal of the camera, you just need to put in your camera IP address, which is 192.168.1.6, and yeah, the web service. So the username, like I said, is admin, and enter. Now this big screen here is supposed to show you my camera, but it is not showing my camera because I haven't installed some ActiveX controls on my browser, which is Google Chrome. I need to install that before it will be able to show you your camera feed. And ordinarily it is meant to pop up on the browser that you need to install ActiveX controls, but my browser security settings will not let that pop up. All right, now to the left here we have what you call a mainstream and a substream. Now the mainstream is a setting that makes your camera show you videos with optimum performance. That's it shows you the videos with the highest quality. Unlike your substream, where it shows you a minimal video quality, it is not as good as the mainstream. The substream is used when you know you are streaming from your camera over a network and you don't want to use serious bandwidth. You don't have serious bandwidth allocation, so you use the substream. But when you're using the mainstream, you know you have good bandwidth allocation, so you can stream your videos with optimum performance. All right, so that's the difference between the mainstream and the substream. I will also get to the settings later on. Now moving to the next tab here, which is set, short for settings. It shows you the camera properties, which we've already done from the config tool. Like I said, it's not going to show you the video here because I haven't installed the ActiveX controls on my browser. All right, now for the next thing here is video, and as you can see here, we have the mainstream again here. Now the code stream type, general, motion, or alarm. Our cameras can record based on motion or based on an alarm. All right, now the encode mode is H.264 and the resolution is 720p like we've done before. Now the frame rate is 25. And let me explain the frame rate to you. A frame rate per second. A frame rate tells the camera how it should process these images when it sees. Like fast images, how it should process fast images. The highest frame rate here is 25. I've seen some cameras that can process 30 frames per second. Now let me liken this to a human being. A man who is drunk, who has ingested alcohol, will not be able to see fast moving objects like that. He's going to see them blurred because he's drunk, and his eyes is seeing it all right, but his brain cannot process that frame per second because he is drunk. So you can say the man is maybe using a 2 frames per second because the image is going to be seen is going to be very blurred. Okay, so that is that about that. Then we have the bitrate type, and we have the reference bitrate, and we have the watermark settings. Do you want digital CCTV to be shown as a watermark on your video? All right, now moving on to the next thing, which is a substream. Now, like I explained earlier, the substream is produces a lesser video quality than the mainstream. As you can see here, the encode mode on our substream is H.264b, which is less than the H.264, and the resolution is a CIF, all right, which is less than the 720p we had, and the frame rate should obviously be less, maybe a 20, and the bitrate type CBR. All right, let me change that to VBR. All right, so that is that about the substream and the mainstream. And the next thing is snapshots. Our IP camera can also take pictures. We could set the camera to take pictures whenever a motion detect has occurred. So this is the settings for how the image should be, the quality of the image, the interval, how soon should it take the pictures. All right, and you see. Then the overlay has to do with how you want your items displayed on your channel. Like for example, the channel title, I can set my channel title to be in the middle as you so please, or to the upper left, or anyhow you want. And also the time, where you want the time to be displayed on your camera, you see there. And let me not neglect this guy over here, privacy mask. Now a privacy mask is for, enables you set a particular place on your screen where you don't want it to show on the channel. All right, like I've set the privacy mask here now, so which means anybody watching this camera will not be able to see what's going on here. I've worked for someone before where some ladies were actually changing in the room, and they asked us to create a privacy mask. All right, so let's say they were changing here, nobody else could see what they were doing. Okay, so a privacy mask is very useful for all those kind of things. All right, the next tab here is what you call the network. Okay, this is where you can set the network parameters, the Ethernet card which we are using because it's a cable connection, the MAC address of the system. You can specify here if you want static IP address or a DHCP IP address. All right, so that is that about the network. And we have the connection, where maximum connection. That's maximum connection has to do with how many people can connect to your IP camera at a particular time. So we have 30 simultaneous connections at a particular time, and 10 simultaneous connections at a particular time, and no more than that. Then we have the TCP port, we have the UDP port, we have the HTTP port, and the RTSP port. Now an RTSP port is for use when you want to stream your camera. All right, when you want to stream your camera, not using any of the services the camera manufacturer has made. What I mean by that is when you're not using a Dalhua NVR to connect to your camera, or when you're not using the web base which you are using now to get to your camera, or you're not using the IP config tool or the mobile applications, you use the RTSP port number to stream the camera. Like for example, you want to stream your camera from VLC player or Windows Media Player. Let me show you streaming my camera via VLC player. So this is VLC player. Since my camera is on the network, I will just come to media and I'll go to open network stream. Now network, you have to enter the URL. Now the URL is now going to be RTSP:/admin:/admin, which stands for username and password at 192.168.1.6. Now this is manufacturer specific. They have this. If you're using a Dalhua, you're going to be using this. So this is this. So I will just go to play. and hello once again, this is me. So this is how to stream your camera from VLC player. All right, so I'm going to stop this video. All right, and I'll just minimize that. All right, so the next is where you have PPOE, which we really don't need, and ddns. All right, now ddns server is good when you want to do a port, an NAT network address translation, or a port forward, and maybe you don't have a static public IP address. Maybe your public IP address is dynamic and it changes anyhow, and you won't be able to keep track of the address, so you won't be able to connect to your cameras. That's why you use a DDNS. Now, a DDNS service is you have to sign up for no IP DDNS or private DDNS or DIN DNS. Now, the no IP DDNS is very free. So when you sign up for the no IP service on their website, all right, you create an account. So you're going to put in your account details here and your ports here and your domain name, which you get when you sign up for the no IP. When you put in all these parameters and you save, so your IP camera from our network is going to keep communicating with the DDNS server, with the no IP DDNS server there, wherever they are. So whenever it's connecting, the DDNS service is going to be notified when your public IP address has changed. So that is very good when you have a public IP address. All right, now for the IP filter, where you can specify who should be able to access this, and then the SMTP email, you could set up an SMTP server here so that the camera can send you emails of whatever is happening, send you emails with attachments. Like for example, when it detects a motion, it can take a picture and it can send you an email. I've seen more advanced cameras where you can set up the email to tell you when the space is finishing on the NVR or those kind of advanced stuffs. So you just set up the SMTP settings. You can use Yahoo or Gmail so long as you have their SMTP settings. Then we have the UPnP. Now the UPnP is called a universal plug and play. The universal plug and play is used for automatic mapping. Like what, that's the same thing for the network address translation. So you don't need to manually go to your router. You don't need to manually go to your router like here. I don't need to go to my router and say, all right, I want to port forward the port 3777, the external port 377 to the internal port 377 for both TCP and UDP to my IP address, which is 192.168.1.6. So I don't need to manually go to my router to do that. All right, I can just specify here that I want to enable UPnP. I want to enable UPnP here. All right, so if I enable UPnP, I'm just going to save. So all these ports are going to be automatically mapped on my router as status mapping field. So when you use UPnP, it automatically maps on your router, so you don't need to manually go and do an NAT on your router. And next we have a bonjour, we have multicast, and we have quality of service and other things. Now that is that for network. Now the next thing is what you call event, video detect. Now motion detect, you're going to enable motion detect. Working period, you're going to enable when you want motion detect to be active, whether you want it on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and you set the time when you want it to be on and the period when you don't want it to be on. That's how you do the motion detect. And you also select the area of the detect. All right, so where you want it to detect, so you select that. All right, and you save. All right, then you also have a record. You want it to record to when it detects a motion. You have to select, and the record delay, how fast should it start recording when it detects it, and should it send an email? That's why I showed you the SMTP settings. Should it send an email when it detects motion, or should it take a snapshot? You can also set it to take a snapshot and send you an email with the snapshot. Then we have what you also call a motion sensitivity. You can select it to 1, with 1 being the least and 6 being the highest. Now the motion sensitivity is very important because I've worked for someone where I had the motion sensitivity at 6. Now, except the cameras are for banking use, where you really need to catch every movement. I installed the camera for somebody, and each minute the cameras were recording because a fly was just flying above the camera, and so because the sensitivity was very high, so you need to reduce the sensitivity to maybe 3. But if it is in the central bank that you're using it, man, you just need to put it at 6 or even 10. The abnormality is to tell you what is happening. Like, for example, abnormality also stands for tamper detection. Maybe the signal on the camera is the camera is losing video signals or that kind of thing. So it's going to notify you. It will also record maybe somebody trying to tamper with your cameras. So it will record that, or it will notify you what is happening. And you also have what you call an IP conflict. An IP conflict will only happen maybe when you have two systems on your network that has using the same IP address. All right. Then next is the storage. Okay, that we have the record schedule here also, and we have the destination. When it records, where do you want it to save? Okay, now we have what you call FTP. We have timer, we have motion detect, and that's the event type is timer, event type motion type, and event type alarm. And we have FTP. FTP is a file transfer protocol, which we also have the settings here. Now you can set up an FTP, client on your system using FileZilla or any other system on the network. So whenever the recordings of whenever there's a motion detect, the recordings could be sent to the FTP server. You create the FTP parameters. You could use FileZilla or other free FTP clients. So once you do that, you connect to the FTP server, and whenever there's a motion detector or an alarm detector or a timer, it's going to send to the FTP. Going to send it to the FTP directory. Likewise, your snapshots here to send it to the FTP directory. Next, you have your record control. How do you want it to be? When your disk is full, do you want it to overwrite? And pre-event record. How many minutes do you want it to start? How many minutes before the event do you want it to start recording? And you also have a post-event record. How many minutes after the alarm or the motion detect has been called off do you want it to continue recording? Okay, now next we have system, where you have general, the device name, the language, and the video standard PAL, and you have the date and time. Then you have accounts, where you can select user accounts, and these are all the user accounts for this camera. Now you have the defaults for you to render the camera back to default settings. And you have the auto maintenance. What do you want? You want the camera to reboot every day at a certain time to delete old files automatically. Yeah, you can do that. And you have the upgrade to upgrade your firmware. And last but not the least, information of the version and the log. Okay, now we also have alarm here, alarm type, motion detect, video masking, and operation prompt. All right, so log out. Now that is that for that. Next thing I'm going to show you is when you want to do an NAT for your IP camera, you will have to come to your router on your local network. I'm going to refresh this page. Okay, so here. So now that I have the parameters I need, I know what I need to do to port forward my camera. I just come here and I select either of this. All right, like I told you, you should not forget these parameters. This parameter 37777 and the HT parameter, which is 80. So let's say, for example, I'm not in my network and I want to watch my camera from outside. I'm just going to have to forward the external port 80 to the internal port 80 for the IP address of 6, which is my camera. Okay, so wherever I am, I just have to, when I have my public IP address here, which is static, I can't show you my IP address right now for security reasons. So let's say I'm on a 197.253.3.3, which is my public IP address, and which has my private IP address for the IP camera as 6, and the HTTP port is 80. And as you can see now, I've forwarded the external port 80 to the internal port 80. So what I did now was I forwarded 80 for my external public IP address. So anytime I go to my web browser outside my network and put in this IP address, so long as my router is on, and I put in this public IP address on my browser, it's going to redirect me to this local IP address of 192.168.1.680 because I've done an NAT. Now likewise, the second one, which is 3777, this is the port for the second one, TCP port. Now when you want to use a mobile application to access your cameras, say the Android software or the iOS software or the Windows software, you're going to need to port forward this. So I'm going to port forward 3777 to the internal port 3777, all right, to this IP address 6. So I'm going to enable that and I'm going to save. All right, okay. Yeah, I don't have another network here. I would have loved to test it with another network, but I only just have one network. Now the other way you can access your camera on your network is via the CMS. It's called Central Management System, and the Dalhua IP cameras also have this service. It is a CMS, like I said, and I have it somewhere here. Let me just close this. And it's called a Smart PSS, which is here. So it's also an application on laptops, where on your computer, where you can access your cameras, all your cameras, and even your NVR. So first of all, when you're on the Smart PSS, you come to the tab called Add. All right, and okay, you come to Settings, Devices. Now, all right, let me just delete this. Okay, all right. So normally you come to refresh. This is also like a config tool. You come to refresh and it searches the network for your IP camera. This is our IP camera, so I will just select that and I will add it. Are you sure you want to add this device? Yes. So now that I've added my camera, it's showing offline, but in a little while it's going to show as come up as online. 192.168.1.6 will save. Okay. Now all right, it is up as online now, and the serial number also shows. So after you've done this, you just go back to home page and you come to live view, and live view here is showing my IP camera here, 192.168.1.6, and hello there, this is me again, and that's perfect. And you could, depending on how many cameras you have, you could select 16 feet and you could duplicate how many of you are. Okay, I could duplicate my cameras in all 9 frames. Like that. So there's 9 of me. And I could just switch them back to 4 like that, or I could take it just to 1. That is how to manage your cameras. Now to the left here, you can see a little controls. Now these controls are for PTZ settings. Now there's some cameras that have what you call PTZ settings, and the PTZ stands for pan, tilt, and zoom. Now the PTZ, you can actually control your cameras using these controls here. You can pan, like I said, tilt, or zoom into the camera. Those are what these settings are for. The camera I'm using right now doesn't have those capabilities. It's just a normal dome camera, so I shouldn't be expecting a pan, tilt, and zoom here. Okay, and here you can also save the view. Right. Now back to home page, you can do a playback, that assuming you have been recording. And the advanced here, you have what you call a video wall. A video wall is just like a device that can detect all. The video wall is a device that can detect all other NVRs on your network, and in this way you can select a particular kind of cameras, or you can segregate the cameras and put them on different monitor. So instead of having one DVR that shows only the cameras that you've connected to the NVR, a video wall will select a particular camera, or can select 2 cameras from NVR A and 4 cameras from NVR B, and display them on the monitor. So that is the use for a video wall. Right, so that is how you can configure your IP camera. Thank you very much for watching. Kindly like and share my video.